Thank you, everybody, for coming. I want to make a couple of comments on Jane's talk. First, about anger. It was a wonderful talk. I'm not correcting you at all. I'm expanding. When Jane talked about anger, the thing about anger is very seductive because it feels really good. If you can't see, just move your cushion. It feels really, really good. And that's the seductive thing of anger. And if you've ever been in a crowd of people that will, some kind of political rally where everyone's really pissed off at the same thing, and you're just chanting slogans and someone's leading you, whatever it is, whatever side of whatever issue you're on, it feels good. It really feels good, that anger. And the thing about anger is the real suffering that it causes to others. We kind of lose sight of that. But so much suffering in this world is caused by someone who's angry at someone else, and it's that someone else who is suffering. So that's a really important thing about anger, is that it's extremely seductive. I mean, I have a friend who's always sending angry political emails, and whenever I say something about it, he says, no, this is what we must do, No, actually you don't, but okay. And then the other thing is, when Jane was talking about our true nature of compassion, and I want to take that a step further. The reason that our true nature is compassionate is because we are not separate. So very few people go around hitting their own heads with hammers. A lot of people go around hitting other people's heads with hammers. But if we realize that their head and our head are not separate. I mean, yeah, they're separate. Your head is there, my head is here, your head has all the fabulous hair, my head has very little hair, whatever it is. But at the same time, it's not separate. We're not separate. And this realization of codependent origination is one of the technical names for it. This realization that we are not a little marble over here dealing with all these little marbles over here, and the only way to do it is to ping into them, this realization that we are not separate. So Buddhism is very interesting because the ontology, the way the universe is, the philosophy of what is, and epistemology, which is how we know what is, and ethics, which is how to act, are not separate. They're separate in Western philosophy, but they're not separate in Buddhism, because this innate realization that we are not separate, that my true nature is actually not my true nature. And this deep attainment of don't know, to understand that what we think is never exactly correct. This deep attainment of don't know, which opens our mind to whatever is around us, implies compassion. It's an inescapable logical conclusion of this ontology and this epistemology, which is very interesting. So thank you very much. And I love you. Why 83? I wonder, why 83 sufferings?
I just said that in the story.
I know. I always wonder about that. Buddhism is really big on numbers. Yeah, I'm sure somebody has a list somewhere of the 83 kinds of suffering, but yeah. There's a book called Buddhism by the Numbers, and then there's also in the back of the Princeton Dictionary of Buddhism, there's about, 15 or 20 pages of all these numbered things, besides the Four Noble Truths. And I mean, it's amazing. So anyway, thank you very much. Now I know that the number 83 is special. So, are there any questions? Yes?
This is a question about 83.
Oh, well, you need
So how many different types of teachings were there? Were there 83,000?
84,000.
Okay.
There's 84,000 expedient means, but they're never listed because the list would be too long. You die before you finish.
Well, I thought that number was tied.
Right.
I thought it was 83 and 83,000.
But see, there is an 84th suffering, so there you go.
So that was my question.
Yeah. For people who will be watching this on YouTube, if anyone watches it on YouTube, Jane talked about how traditionally there's 83 kinds of suffering, but the 84th is wanting to not suffer. So, okay. You have a question?
Yeah, so I was reading some commentary from another school, and
maybe it was more rumor than commentary, I don't know.
Uh-huh.
But the thing was that falling asleep during, falling asleep during sitting meditation is a sign of great resistance. And I was wondering, resistance to what?
Falling asleep during sitting meditation is a sign that you're tired. But the other thing about it is, you know, a lot of people think, oh, falling asleep during meditation is absolutely terrible. I mean, there was some guy who would, like, you know, hit himself with an awl, you know, a sharp thing, and he just, you know, jam it into his leg. Kids don't do this at home, right? So there's all this stuff, and you know, when we sit retreats, there's this stick back there, and it's the hitting stick. Oh my God, they hit each other. One time I was in Japan to sit with a really wonderful Zen master in a city in Japan, obviously not in our school, a Rinzai teacher, Shoto Harada. And I got off, my plane was delayed, and so I landed in, like, it was after midnight Japanese time, and I had to find a cab, and this was a little town. Nobody knew English. They say everyone speaks English. They don't. Why should they? Okay, so I'm landing in this little airport, and there's nobody who speaks English, and I have to find a cab driver. And somehow I find some airline person who understands I need a cab, shows me to a cab, and then I show the cab driver the piece of paper with the address, and he doesn't make any sense. And I say, Zen, and he still doesn't make any sense. And I sort of maybe said, Rinzai. Anyway, he finally got and says, oh, wah, wah, wah. And I said, right. But so what that stick is about, is not hurting people. What that stick is about is when you're sleeping, it's to help you wake up. And what happens is they stand in front of you, and you say, oh, and then you hold your hand like that, and then you bow, and then they, you know, hit you sort of, but it's like it's a massage. It's a slapstick, so it rebounds, and it's like getting a massage. Like if you've ever slapped your face to wake up, that's what it feels like. And actually, when your back really hurts, it's really good for you. It's like an instant massage. So you kind of just go like this, and you know, when you're not sleepy, but your back really hurts, and then boom, boom, and then your back feels better. So that's the hitting stick. So traditionally, you know, sleeping is not a good thing on the cushion, but as one who does it a lot, I will tell you that it is a tremendous opportunity, because what happens when you fall asleep with it on the cushion, if you are paying attention, that is, if you're not, you know, trying to avoid practice, but if you're really practicing and you still find your eyes closing, and I'm one of those people that's affected by fluorescent lights, so if the wrong lighting is in the Dharma room, thank God not here, but if the wrong lighting is in the Dharma room, I'm guaranteed to fall asleep, because the flickering of the fluorescent light will just make my brain do that. But if you're paying attention, what you can see as you're falling asleep is you can see how the world as you created it is insubstantial, because it starts disintegrating. You see how your mind makes the world, because your mind is now unmaking the world. And then when you wake up, and I'll have you tell you another story about that, when you wake up, what you see is how your mind creates your world. Again, in an act of like, oh, there's Kyle. Oh, I don't know your name, but you have earrings on. You know, whatever it is, you become, as you become aware of things, and you see how you put them in little boxes that you can recognize, you know? So it's a fabulous opportunity to see this thing. We say mind makes everything. Well, when you're falling asleep and when you're waking up, if you're really paying attention, then you see that. No one has to tell you about it. You don't have to read neurophysiology or anything like that. You know, you don't have to read, you know, great Buddhist philosophers. You can just say, oh, that's how it works, you know? So it's a great opportunity. There's nothing that can't be used in this world. It's really interesting. There's nothing that can't be used. So I'll tell you about waking up. So when you're sitting on the cushion, you can't really fall asleep, because then you'll fall over. So, you know, you're always jerking yourself awake when you sleep on the cushion. So there's certain However, there's certain postures that are more stable than others, and so you can get more deeply into sleep before you jerk yourself up. So a friend of ours, in fact, he used to be one of the teachers here, but now he's living in Rhode Island, Dennis Durmeyer, Judo Popesonym. He was, Judo Popesonym is a title for a certain level of teacher, and he was on a trip to Korea, and he was sitting sharing an orange with a Buddhist monk or something like that. Anyway, he was talking to this Buddhist monk, and the guy said, "Do you sit full lotus?" And Dennis said, "No, I don't sit full lotus." And the guy said, "Well, then how do you sleep on the cushion?" So thank you for your question. Okay. Are there any other questions? Anyone online, in the room? Yes.
Thanks. I'm just kind of wondering about the importance of retreats
Oh.
and when to consider going on one, what kind to go on. I'm not considering running off to India for 6 months anytime soon, but
Well,
you know.
in India, you wouldn't find Zen, so. Actually, you would. There are a few scattered places, but yeah,
Sure.
okay. Okay, so you want to know about retreats?
Well, yeah.
Yeah,
I mean,
that's a
sure.
wonderful question, especially because we have so many relatively new people and some even brand new people here. That's a great question. So first of all, let me put in a plug for retreats. So retreats, as many people in this room can tell you, in fact, Wanda just got back from 2.5 weeks of Kilche. Yeah, 2.5 weeks of a 90-day retreat. Other people sat for 90 days. She managed to do 2.5 weeks. So what retreats give you is a dedicated space without your usual, what's the word I want? Your usual distractions. Now, as anyone who sits at a retreat can tell you, or has sat at a retreat can tell you, distractions will appear. But they're not your usual ones. You can't act on them. It's not like you see your kids fighting and you have to do something about your kids fighting, or you have to get to your job, or there's traffic, or whatever. You know, it's nothing that you can deal with. So you just see your mind. You see your mind moving and you bring it back to your practice, bring it back to your practice, bring it back to your practice. So it gives this space where you can really see who you are. And you can really let go of all this stuff that we make. And it's extremely disciplined. So here, because of COVID, we don't have many people sleep over here. There's a few people who live far away. So most of us have to drive in and drive home at night. Our retreats start at 6:30 and go to 8:30. 6:30 morning, 8:30 at night for the multi-day retreats. The one-day retreats are shorter. But traditionally, and I know the way I grew up and practiced, is you'd be on the cushion for bows at 5:15 in the morning, and you'd go until 9:30 at night. And maybe we'll be able to go back to that. So it's a very intense focus thing. It's not like you just don't have distractions. You can, go to Antigua or something like that if you want to do that. But you don't have your regular distractions, and it's this very intense focus. And it's transformative. That's the only way I can put it. It's really transformative of people's lives.
Just a 2-day retreat can be, or does it,
Well, then,
the longer ones?
Then so now I want to go, that's the plus side of retreats. The thing about retreats is they are very intense. They're physically intense. I noticed a few people stood up, during our little 20 or 25 minutes here. Well, imagine if you're sitting like 7 or 8 hours over a day, and you have 108 bows in the morning, and you have much more chanting than we did here, and you have all of this and not much time to rest. And the meals are formal, you have these 4 bowls and you have to put the rice in the left hand, all this stuff, you have to clean them a certain way. So it's very formal, it's very, your actions are very restricted. Maybe you'll have a half hour to take a walk here or a half hour to take a nap there, but basically you're very regimented. Once my husband, Stan Lombardo, Zen Master Hae, the other teacher here, when we were much younger students, he asked Zen Master Sung San, how is Zen different from the army? And that's what he was talking about. So it's sort of like basic training. I mean, it's very, very regimented in many ways. And that's good because it takes away choice. You know, we get hung up on choice, as Jane said, desire. We get hung up on choice. You have very few choices on a retreat. So that's difficult for many people. And so I always recommend don't even try a retreat until you've been sitting for several weeks or a month, somewhat regularly, you know, preferably every day, preferably for 20 minutes a day, just to see if you can deal with it. And we actually have people sign a disclaimer on a retreat. I know that this is very intense and can be very hard and, you know, whatever. And there have been occasional people, it's never happened here, but there have been occasional times and places that I know where someone has flipped out during a retreat. It can happen. So you want to make sure that people are aware this is very intense. Don't go into it unless you feel that you have some kind of solid grounding and some kind of confidence. If you've never done a retreat and you're thinking of doing a retreat and you've had some kind of regular practice, so you say, yeah, I think I can do this. I think I can get through this. Start with a one-day retreat. That's 9 to 4. And the meals are not formal meals. They're brown bag meals. We have a kind of form for it. Like, you don't just start eating. You have to wait for everybody. You know, you serve tea. You know, it's a little bit of formality, but it's not nearly as intimidating. And so you start with a one-day retreat. And then if that is good, and you say, hey, I like this. This works for me. I want to do more. Then you do one of our 2-day retreats, which is actually Friday evening through Sunday around noon, a little after noon. So it's not 2 real days. It's basically like sort of one and an augmented half. And so then you do that. And I would love to do a 5-day retreat. We tried scheduling one in January. A whole bunch of people in October said, yeah, I'll do a 5-day retreat in January. And then December came and they went, and so we only had a 2-day retreat. But I would love to do a 5-day retreat like in July or something. If people want to do a 5-day retreat in July, let me know. And 5 days is the maximum that we do here. But Providence Zen Center has these very long retreats, 90 days in the winter, and then just ended, and then either 4 or 5 weeks in the summer. Both Ting and Jane and Wenda have gone to the summer one. I don't know, have other people here gone to them? I don't know. And you don't have to do the whole 4 or 5 weeks or the whole 90 days, but you have to do a considerable chunk. I believe it's at least 1 week. So if retreats really fit you and they fit your life and you can do it with your responsibilities, because you can't just, I mean, Buddha ran away, but he was a prince and there were people to take care of his wife and his kid and his parents. So it was okay that he ran away. Most of us, if we run away, we leave the people behind in a bad situation. So yeah, if you have the kind of life where you can do a longer retreat, there's a place you can do it, which is within our school, which is Providence Zen Center. Or you can go to Korea. That's fun. I've done that. But yeah, so thank you for your question about retreats. And I do encourage people to do that, but I do encourage you to do them not with the idea of, like people say, like I remember when I would go to sit with Shoto Harada, and there's a ferry that you take to get to the Whidbey Island where he does his retreats in America. And on the ferry, sometimes people would say to me, well, what are you doing? Where are you going? And I said, well, I'm going to Whidbey Island. Well, I'm going to Whidbey Island. I'm going to sit a retreat. Oh, that seems so nice. So don't go into it with that idea, because it's not. It's very intense. It's very wonderful. And I encourage people to do them. But as I say, only if you set a solid base of practice, so you have a pretty good idea you can get through it. Start with a small retreat, then go to longer retreats. Thank you so much for your question. I think many, many people here have done retreats, and we know how wonderful they are. Yeah. Time's up. So let me make announcements. Next Sunday is fantastic. So at 10 o'clock, we start